Hey guys, it's Alysa Rushton, and I am a near-death survivor. Let's just dive into it. I woke up dead on the toilet. To give you just a tiny little bit of backstory, I was really sick. I had multiple autoimmune diseases, and I was on a lot of medications. I had a PICC line in my arm and was on an end-of-life pain management. Basically, it was all too much for me. One day, it was just enough to take me over the edge, and so I literally went to the bathroom and sat down on the potty. When I woke up, I was dead. I was on the other side. So, unlike a lot of people, I skipped those moments where you're pulling up and out of the body and you're able to see yourself. I skipped all of that. I completely bypassed that and went up directly into what you might call God consciousness or universal consciousness. The amazing thing about it was like taking off the tightest suit that you'd ever worn in your life. It was a super physical feeling. So, literally, it felt very physical. But I looked down and I realized I have no body. And there was a point where I was traveling up, and I had the feeling of being everywhere all at once. My consciousness was in the place where I had released a lot of the Alysa body identity, so I didn't have the sense of I was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed person. I didn't have that at all. I was up and past the soul level of consciousness, and I got to go to this place where it was almost like, and the best way I can describe this to you is if you've ever seen one of those movies where there's a person sitting behind the security cameras and they're looking at all these security cameras on a screen and then watching from behind the screen. It was almost like that, only they were like little bubbles of experiences and realities, and I could experience them and see them all at once. Billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of these realities. And so, at first, I was just up there playing and stretching around. And I say stretching because it felt like stretching my consciousness into each point. I got to see some amazing stuff that I don't even have human words for, different planets, different realities, different civilizations, different timelines, different things on our planet, different everybody's experience. I couldn't dive into, and it was as if I was universal consciousness or God consciousness, coming in and really living and feeling that person's experience. And so, it was a really broad perspective, and it really felt like I was that divine mind and that one source consciousness. Now, I'm trying to break this into pieces, but technically, this was happening all at once. So, at the same time, if you can imagine going into all these different experiences but then also having the ability to see how our world is created, how our universe is created in terms of light and then sound and then sacred geometry, and how that then comes down to form the physical reality that we encounter. I got to see different timeline streams. So here I am, I'm bopping all over the cosmos, I'm able to stretch that consciousness in all of these different places. And by the way, I don't know how long I was doing all that. At one point, I'm getting all these downloads, all this information about how the world works and how reality works and what we're here to do. And one of the biggest things that I've received on the other side was literally, we are here to expand consciousness. And we tend to think of things on our planet in terms of right and wrong and good or bad. But technically, the download I got on the other side was, we're literally just expanding consciousness. And so, as I'm doing all of that, I finally see this one orb-like energy that I felt really drawn to and attracted to. So, I go and I dive into this orb of energy, and it is basically the planet Earth. And now you have to remember, I was bouncing around all of these different places that were people's experiences on Earth and also other places, right? Not just Earth, alien civilizations, different timelines, the whole gamut. I got to see Atlantean timelines, Lemurian timelines. So much that it would be impossible to describe all of it to you. So, I was seeing this place, this orb of Earth, and so I decided I'm gonna go check it out. So, this energy, go down and I check this out. And as soon as I get into the energy of this, what happened was I lost that connection with the universal all that is, and I came into more of my Alysa identity. And I could see that it looked very much like Earth, except everything was a little olive drabby. You know, I looked at the sky, and it looked olive-colored, and everything had sort of that olive tinge to it or that kind of army green tinge. And so, I thought to myself, what would feel good? And so, I thought about my ex-boyfriend who, by the way, had a lot of addictions. When I passed away, I had a lot of addictions too. I was totally addicted to drugs, and I was a smoker, and I was a drinker. And so, I went to hang around this ex-boyfriend of mine. And I realized I can't communicate with him. I couldn't speak, and he couldn't hear me, and he didn't even really know that I was there. But I saw him perfectly in his condo that he was living in, and it felt really good. It felt nice to be hanging around him. And I went and visited a couple more people. And as soon as I would think of somebody, I would be right there. And so, I didn't really understand where I was, but I was just kind of going with it. And at some point, a group consciousness came to me, and this group consciousness basically said, hey, you can stay here as long as you want, and it's going to be a very healing place for you. And you can also go back now. If you stay here, you don't get to come back into the Alysa body. But if you do go back, you can keep your Alysa body and your Alysa-ness, but it's going to be some of the hardest work you've ever done. And I don't even think I thought about it for more than a nanosecond, and I just thought, yes, I want to go back. And as soon as I thought yes, I was basically slammed down into my consciousness. And I say slammed down because one of the things I think people don't necessarily understand about being here on planet Earth is it's a very dense reality compared to up there. Up there, there's very high frequency, There's a lot of other civilizations that don't have a body as dense as ours that are very much light bodies. And so, when you come back down here after being up there, it feels very hard. And I always make the analogy of it felt like being on a 1,000-foot building and getting slammed down into concrete. And so, literally, I then woke up on the toilet. There were 20 EMTs in front of me, standing around, asking me questions, all of which I didn't know the answers to. And I remember one of the questions they asked me finally was, "What is your name?" And I remember thinking, oh gosh, I really should know my name. And when they asked me, what is your name? And I didn't know, and I looked over. I was married at the time, and I looked over at my husband who's kneeling there. There was a little wall, which, by the way, was the only reason why I stayed on the toilet because I had slumped up against the wall when I died. And so, I looked down at my husband, and I didn't know this yet, but the whole left side of my face had stopped working. My lips were blue, my nails were blue, now the oxygen's coming back, but I'm there, and I look down at my husband, and I say, honey, what's my name? And he said, it's Alysa, baby. And so, I looked at the EMTs and I said, it's Alysa, baby. And so, I didn't even know what my name was. I just was able to repeat the words. Then, after that moment, they realized how bad of a situation I was in. And so, I don't really remember a lot between that point of waking up to the next point. I remember was they got me into the ambulance, and they had already given me a shot of Narcan, which blocks all of your drug receptors, which is what happened. I had had a massive drug overdose. And so, in the ambulance, I remember the EMT calling the hospital to give me that second dose of Narcan because that can also kill you again. And so, in the ambulance, I then shut down again. So, the next moment I awoke, I was in the hospital, strapped down to a gurney, legs flailing, legs kicking. And it was that moment when I had the awareness that my life was really broken, that what I was doing to try to heal myself from all of these autoimmune diseases wasn't working. And so, it was at that point where I made a conscious choice and a decision that I had to do it differently. And what was amazing, and I'm so grateful for this, is on the other side, I got all of these downloads about how our life works here and what we are here to do. And so, part of my journey after I got back was really integrating those pieces and bringing them into a physical understanding because on the other side, there wasn't a lot of words. There was telepathy, there was imagery, and sacred geometry. But I wasn't actually sitting down and having conversations. It was all, blocks of energy coming through, blocks of thought, blocks of transmitted data, basically, that I had to then come back here and try to piece together and figure out. And so, one of the biggest things that I learned on the other side was that we are here to expand our consciousness, and that our experience basically goes up and informs the consciousness, the bigger consciousness. And so, if you can think about it like how the sun is, how the sun's really big and bright and it has all these rays, we're just individuated rays of sun, each and every one of us, and each and every plant and creature and being on the planet. We're literally individuated rays of this one sun. But we appear very separate, and we appear very apart from each other. And what then I saw was that because of that, what one person does in terms of changing their life or changing a program that they're running or changing something about themselves, that then informs the total consciousness, and that kind of informs the whole picture. So, I guess how I would say it is the more we work on ourselves down here, the more we inform this consciousness, and the more it can spread like a ripple effect, because ultimately we are this one being. And as much as we can't really see that here, as much as we can't with our eyes, delineated modern-day science is actually showing that to us, which is really kind of cool. One of the things they showed me on the other side was that so many people for so many generations have held such intense physical trauma and hardship. And one of the things that we're doing at this time is we're sort of unprogramming that trauma, and we're unpacking it, so to speak, and clearing it from our systems. And I believe it's one of the reasons why now we're seeing so many near-death stories and so many of us able to talk about this, so that you don't have to go through that yourself, because I will tell you, it's a hard experience. Not necessarily doing it, actually dying itself is one of the easiest things to do. It's a really beautiful process, and you don't ever die. You just release your physical body. And I always tell people it's like when you go trade in your Ford for a jet plane, right? You can get the sense of, I'm driving my Ford around, and I go trade that in, and somebody gives me a jet to ride around in. So, it's a totally different experience, but you're still the driver. You're still driving a vehicle. It's just a different vehicle. And I also got on the other side that when we pass away, that we get a lot of choice in where we go next. And ultimately, that choice, this is really important, that choice has a lot to do with what you're thinking and feeling when you pass away. So, for me, that was my near-death experience. It was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. Like I said, it's a beautiful experience. And I also believe that you cannot die before it's your time. That really, truly, if it's not your time, you won't be able to do it. And in my case, I wasn't able to do it fully, right? I got the choice to come back. And as you've heard, so many of these near-death survivors get the choice to come back. And so, isn't that just a beautiful, peaceful thing to know that your death is scripted, and your death is supported, and there's a part of us that does get to choose when it's our time? And if it's not our time, we can choose to come back. So, I hope you guys loved hearing this story. I want to thank you for having me here today.